Hey guys, by this time you probably learned about complex definitions and methods in regards to political, social, and economic developments in Hong Kong.
Today, we're going to learn about an abbreviation that most of you have probably seen, but maybe you don't quite know what it means.
GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product of a country. Economists use GDP to keep track of how an economy is doing. GDP measures the value of all final goods and services produced in an economy in a given period of time, usually a quarter or a year.
For example, a restaurant buys wheat, butter, and other necessary products to make dim sum. The cost of those raw materials is included in the final price of the dim sum we purchase. The price of that dim sum, along with the final price of everything we buy, such as food, clothing, or electronics, is added to what the government spends on education, the health system, and other services. This creates that big number called GDP.
Real GDP is a measure of the value of economic output adjusted for inflation.
Values in nominal GDP are not adjusted to inflation. Thus, as a result, it appears higher than real GDP.
A recession occurs when GDP is decreasing. An expansion occurs when GDP is increasing.
However, when you want to calculate GDP growth, it might not be that simple. If prices have gone up in a year, it means inflation is included, so it will not show whether a country has actually produced more goods and services.
If you do not know what an inflation is, it is simply a rise in prices over a designated time period, which can also cause a rise in the cost of living.
Price fluctuations can hide the real state of the economy, so by simply subtracting inflation, we get the real story of whether a country's economy is contracting or growing. That is when economists use real GDP.
Through the study of GDP, we can better understand the economic development. High GDP means better economic development in countries and territories.
Hong Kong is ranked among the global highest, with a long-term projected growth rate of around 2 and 3%, and a GDP per capita of over 38,000 US dollars. You might ask, how does Hong Kong achieve such a high level of GDP?
That might be a very obvious answer. Hong Kong has the fourth largest port and is ranked ninth in the World Trade Rankings. Hong Kong also exports a numerous amount of goods, such as materials, clothing, garments, and textiles.
With the help of the government and a low tax policy, Hong Kong becomes a very attractive settlement for foreign direct investment, which increases its GDP from an expenditure point of view.
Some of the fundamental causes of growth is Hong Kong's geographical location, which makes it easy for trade between the Western world and Asia,
as well as hardworking Hong Kongers and excessive overtime.
This table shows different categories that are being used to calculate GDP.
The first one is called GDP from expenditure. It calculates the sum of total consumption, government, and investment spending, as well as changes in value of stocks and exports, minus exports.
The second method depends on the incomes factor. GDP is equal to the sum of income from people in jobs and in self-employment, like wages and salaries, profits of private sector businesses, and rent income from ownership of land.
The third approach for finding GDP is based on the value of output. It counts the value added from each of the main economic sectors: primary, secondary, manufacturing, and quaternary.
However, we cannot blindly trust GDP index, as the temptation is great for government officials to manipulate economic statistics. Turns out, there is an easy way to tell if a country's GDP is being artificially inflated. Just look at the night sky. A large body of research shows that the brightness of a country's nighttime lights, as seen from satellites, is highly correlated with GDP growth. The more money people have, the more likely they are to have lights on at night. Businesses will also stay open later, resulting in even more light. If authoritarians are boosting GDP, then the reported growth in these countries should be higher than nighttime light data would suggest. It is found that in countries with similar growth in nighttime brightness, the more autocratic regimes report higher GDP growth. The following chart shows the average growth of nighttime light brightness and GDP for governments that Freedom House designates as free and not free. Notice that the growth in nighttime light is almost identical, while GDP growth is much larger for countries considered not free. It is estimated that autocratic regimes inflate their GDP growth by 15 to 30%. It would mean that some countries are substantially less wealthy than the reported statistics suggest. By the official statistics, the fastest growing countries in the world from 1992 to 2005 were Myanmar and China, with both growing by about 120% over the period, or about 6.3% per year. After adjusting for possible manipulation using nighttime light data, it was suggested that they only grew by around 90% or 4.9% per year. As more alternative data becomes available, it will be increasingly difficult for the manipulators of government statistics to get away with it.
That's all for today. We hope you learned something that you can use in your future studies.
See you
next
soon.
time.